The things that I love about this country are broken. I thought Tommy Robinson was a racist. That's what I was told.
Gary Lineker, for example. What are your views on him and the BBC?
He's a prick.
Shoot from the hip, Lee. What about the cultural shift in the UK? Any concerns?
You know, there's certain crimes that never used to happen in the UK, like acid attacks.
Prison officers being seriously assaulted, boiling water over them, oil, multiple stabbings, terrorists loose on the wing. Who gives a shit how heated it was? 𝐵𝐸𝐿 wanted Rupert Lowe to go to jail. Does free speech exist in the UK?
Why don't they put the British people first? The first duty of any government is to keep their citizens safe. And we've got actual terrorists crossing the channel.
He likes to tell us he's going to smash the gangs.
Bullshit. We have a right to defend our shores. Don't worry about Hamas. You know, there's only a bunch of, bloodthirsty, medieval, brutal fucking terrorists.
Do you think Rupert Lowe's dismissal was justified?
Yes, actually.
You can always overlook some bad things if they do one or two good things, but I always think to myself, remember this, Liam, Fred West was a great builder. They don't need to invade. They've done that already, subtly, covertly, ready to strike, and I can't believe that people aren't talking about this out loud. I want to say a quick thank you to our sponsors, Gold Seal. I use their products every single day, and now I finally get to work with them. I use their products for anti-inflammatory, reduced anxiety, better sleep, and mental clarity. I'm going to put a link to their website in the description, along with a 10% discount code for you to take advantage of. Go and have a look at their website, see if there's anything in there for you. I hope you enjoy this week's episode, and good health. Lee.
Pleasure to meet you.
Yeah, and you. Thanks for coming on.
Glad to be here.
A regular on GB News. Now, we're going to cover a hell of a lot today. So before we do, give me a little bit about your background and then sort of segue into how you become a regular face on our TV screens, commentating on everyday politics.
Okay, well, Southampton born and bred, down from the South Coast. I got into politics by accident, actually. There was a chap who lived opposite me back, if anyone knows, I used to live in Hamble, which is near Southampton. And I just saw him, he had a bad leg and he was delivering leaflets up my road, and I felt really sorry for him because he was really struggling and he had quite a few houses to deliver. So I just sort of was driving in from work, saw him and thought I'd offer a bit of help because he seemed to be struggling. And I spent the next half an hour walking up and down the road delivering leaflets for him because he has this bad leg. And they sort of said to me, why don't you come down, if you're interested in politics, why don't you come down and join us at our meet or whatever next? And I thought it was a bit weird, but I was being polite, right? So I kind of just said, yeah, sure, Malcolm, yeah, no worries, and went down there. Turns out I'd got myself into a Lib Dem meeting, right? So at the time, I wasn't very political. So for me, it wasn't about, political stance or anything like left or right, didn't really bother me. I wasn't really into that. But politics itself was quite interesting to me back then. So I kind of rolled with it a little bit. Things led on to certain things. And then I got involved in the 2010 election and I got helped Chris Huhne to win his seat. That was just a little bit before when he got done for speeding and he lied. Do you remember that? And he served some time in prison.
Top tier criminal.
Top tier, yeah, top tier. Him and his missus basically lied about whether who was driving at the time. They basically told lies and they found out.
That's what they won't like.
Yeah, they don't like that at all.
No.
So anyway, to cut a long story short, I got involved with the Lib Dems more because of the political thing, but I got to admit I didn't feel like I fit in very well. They were all right, but I didn't really like the people that were there. Very judgmental, very cliquey. But what I really enjoyed and what I got feedback that I was really good at was the doorstep. I mean, I'd done so much canvassing around 𝐬𝐿. I canvassed with Clegg, I canvassed with Karina Trimmingham, who was Chris Huhne's bit on the side at the time, which was another story that was going on.
He's a bit of a boy, isn't he?
He's a bit of a boy. I actually quite liked him. He was all right. He was quite sound behind the cameras. At one point, I had him and Karina Trimmingham in the back of a Renault Clio driving around 𝐬𝐿, going to our next delivery point or whatever. But I really got a kick out of it, and I got a kick out of talking to people on the doorstep. And for me, it wasn't really about left or right. As I said, it was just about getting involved in politics, talking to people, finding out. And I just got a kick out of it. I enjoyed it. And it was nice to be told by people from the kind of top of the Lib Dems that actually I was pretty damn good at canvassing. So they would get me So they would send me places. As soon as they realised I was pretty good at it, I'd get sent all over the place, and they'd do all that. There was talk of me going up to head office. But anyway, we won that seat. But when we went into coalition, when the Lib Dems went into coalition with the Tories, I started to feel the backlash personally. Because if you remember at the time, because they didn't, because the Lib Dems didn't win the election, they had to sacrifice some of their manifesto. Now, I got it in the fucking neck down the pub quite a lot. And of course, it was all new to me. Like, I just didn't realise, I didn't even anticipate a backlash. I was completely fresh. I had no idea what was going on. And all of a sudden, I'm like, people I respect and liked felt like I'd lied to them. So I got my first kind of taste of what it was like to get involved in politics. And at the same time, I was starting my own business. So I'm a developer, web developer, coder, and I just started my own business. It's running 15 years strong now. But I was running my own business, and I started to feel more naturally at home listening to conservative values, or what I thought were conservative values at the time. So I started to agree with Cameron a little bit more than I did with Clegg. So I went on a bit of a political journey at that point. And between 2010 and 2016, I found myself naturally at home as a conservative. It kind of matched my lifestyle. It made sense to me. And do you know what the biggest thing was about it, which still sticks with me today? The Lib Dems kind of judged me, kept me out of things. It was really cliquey. I didn't give a shit, but I noticed it.
But you observed it.
I observed it. As soon as I started mixing people from the right, there was none of that. They didn't judge me in the slightest. They didn't care what my background. I mean, I'm a working class lad. I ran my own business at the time, but not many people knew that. I don't come from money. And my impression of the Conservatives that was given to me by people on the left was they're all snooty, that they're all kind of posh and rich, and it kind of crushed all of the things that I've been taught to hate Tories. I come from a bit of a left-wing family. My dad's a lefty. I'm sure he will not even dare watch this because he don't watch anything that I'm on anymore at all. We still get on really well. Don't get me wrong, but we try not to talk politics. He still hates Thatcher to this day. He's that type of lefty. So I've been taught not directly but indirectly to hate Tories. That's kind of how. And of course, it was a massive learning curve for me because I was thinking, hold on a minute, I should stop listening to what people tell me and I should work it out for myself. So I just felt completely at home with Conservatives. That's how I got into politics, and it kind of went from there.
Tell me what you love about Britain, because I've got loads of things I want to fire at you. So if we start with a positive, we can only go downhill from there. So what do you still love about the country? It's
hard to answer that question. I'll explain why. Because the things that I love about this country are broken. And that's why I find this hard to answer. I love the traditions. I love our royal family. I'm not like the biggest royalist. I love the concept of the royal family. I love the fact that this country is a tolerant country, that we are, based around law and order and fairness. And, those are the things to me which make our country stand out above the rest. There's a lot of countries in the world where you don't get a fair trial, and if you're homosexual, you get thrown off a building. I'm really proud of our country for those things. But every single one of the pillars of our society that I am proud of or was proud of is broken, and that's what drives me to get gobby on Twitter, and to I'm very lucky to be invited onto GB News, which is how they found me. So it was through Twitter they got in contact a few years ago. But those are the things that's what drives me most of all, especially now, because I feel right now that is an existential crisis for the UK at the moment. I see that our legal system, our judicial system, the police, our civil service, all of the things that we used to, the BBC, our media, all of these institutions which I trusted, I felt naive trusting them now. And as I said, my turning point, what was a profound moment for me, was Brexit. Brexit was profound for me because it taught me in a really kind of what's the word I'm looking for? A very aggressive way that they're lying to us, right? So I was really gutted that the BBC that I thought was, gold standard, how wrong was I, would represent the debate fairly. So you'd hear good reasons why we'd leave the European Union and good reasons why to stay in the European Union. But everything was equally balanced. You heard both sides of the stories. It was very quickly evident that the BBC did not want anyone to vote to leave the European Union. I'm trying not to go too far off topic. What I'm trying to say is that, to me, that's a big institution in this country, the BBC. And I just discovered very quickly that they were lying to us.
Well, I've really enjoyed your backstory, and I now sort of understand where you're coming from and why you chose to come from there and why you do what you do. So that's great. So now we're getting to the specifics so I can pick into the mind of Lee Harris. You spoke about fair trials in the UK. Now, have you seen Tommy Robinson's latest charges?
I have, yeah.
The Daily Mail saga. I'm going to say it anyway, but those that are watching and listening that don't know what's happened, Tommy Robinson's been released from prison recently for trumped-up charges, a contempt of court, which he pled guilty to. He was in solitary confinement. 2 days before his release, he got new charges slapped on him, and the charges was this. 2 journalists from the Daily Mail travelled abroad, took photographs of Tommy and his family and his friends, and they put pictures of him online, and they doxed him. They put his exact address online, which someone like Tommy Robinson, that puts him in grave danger.
Absolutely.
As we know. So Tommy had to flee his holiday resort, and he basically wanted to do the same to the journalists. So he's then had pictures taken of the journalists where they were in the UK, and then he let the journalists know. And I believe he did post pictures of the journalists, but he said, what I'm not going to do, because I play by there's a code in this. There's a code in journalism, and I'm not a scumbag. You dox my address, my family's images, my friends. You cause so many problems and put us in danger. I'm not going to do that to you. But I can find you when I want to find you. So if you continue to do that, then I'll go down the same route. He done exactly what the journalists done themselves, but to a lesser degree. But he got charged with that, and he's recently been in court. I was in there, I heard the whole thing, and I'm glad that I do attend these court cases and I go to these public events, because when the media print their side of the story, it reassures me that we can never, ever trust the mainstream media, which we'll come to. But what are your views on this even being allowed to happen, this taking place in the UK? Independent journalism is now coming under attack, and that's the only journalism that I rely on now. Yeah.
My views on this most recent situation, my gut reaction was, before I knew any of the detail, was that's a bit of a coincidence, isn't it? The moment he comes out of prison, he's straight back into court. And to me, knowing a little bit about Tommy, that's happened to him for a very long time. I was going to say his whole life, but it's happened to all of his adult life. It seems to me that the state, say what you like about Tommy Robinson, it seems to me that the state has treated him really badly. He gets singled out. And, part of you wants to say, maybe that's a conspiracy theory, maybe that's not true. But then you have other cases, that don't necessarily involve Tommy Robinson, like Lucy Connolly, and other cases. And then you see for your own eyes the state persecuting people, for a post. And it all kind of creates a picture that, to me, made me think that that's a bit of a coincidence. I watched a couple of clips last night, actually, to bring myself up to date. I listened to what Tommy had to say. I've got to admit, my gut agreed with him. I was actually quite pleasing seeing him doing the same thing back to the journalists that they did to him. That's kind of how I operate. I kind of like that mentality. So fair play to him in some respects.
And the mainstream media, they are bullies. And
totally.
I know, and I've interviewed enough celebrities to know that they will drive you to suicide, and they don't care.
Yeah,
it holds no bearing or weight to their life or their conscience whatsoever, as long as they get the clicks and the hits, as long as the tabloid, they get the pat on the back by the big man in the chair. If the story does well, it's kind of sociopathic what they do. To be able to print lies, if it's honest journalism, which I think we're desperate for.
Yeah.
We don't want to be lied to by the media, by politicians,
100%.
by anybody. We're sick to death of being lied to. And also, we're not as stupid as they think we are.
People are waking up to this now, right? And it's becoming a lot more visible. I mean, I talk from my own experience. I thought Tommy Robinson was a racist. That's what I was told. You know, that's the opinion that I was told to form, basically, when I was a normie and I wasn't that into politics. But then when I start to... This is why Brexit was so profound for me, because it made me question everything, absolutely everything. The media, the politicians, I didn't trust any of them anymore. I still don't, right? So that's why when I can't remember what it was specifically that made me look into Tommy Robinson. Something maybe he was in the press or something at the time that sparked it off. And I thought to myself, do you know what? No, I'm wiping everything that I've been told clean from my mind about Tommy Robinson. I'll make my own mind up and you know, see if I can find these videos people are talking about and stuff like that. And I'm not going to lie, I did some proper good research on it. I went down rabbit holes and all sorts. And I came out of it thinking the man's been persecuted. I just came out of it thinking, I can't find a single... I watched hours of footage, probably over the course of 2 or 3 days when I had nothing better to do. And I just went down a rabbit hole. I couldn't find a single second of footage that made me think that this man is a racist. I went back through all the things he said about when he was in the EDL, right? Of course the EDL was considered far right, but I understand if you grew up in Luton and what was going on at the time, why you might end up starting something like that. But even when he was in the EDL, I couldn't find anything that he'd said that was racist.
Where he would be getting blamed for things that other people said that were part of the movement. And you know, when you've got 500,000 people part of one gigantic movement that are all absolutely forgotten about and furious with what's going on, you lose complete control. You cannot be responsible for what anybody else says. You can only be responsible for what you do, which is why eventually he stepped down, because he said, you know, I can't be getting the blame for other people's actions or words.
Yeah, and I made a very mental note that he made a point of explaining who was involved in the movement, people from all different colours, and it wasn't about racism. It was about fighting very specifically, every time he mentioned it, Islamist extremism. Now, I've spoken out, and we all should speak out about Islamist extremism, but because Tommy was so far ahead of the curve, you know, he was called a racist. I've seen the clips of him with Piers Morgan. I've seen the clips with him, you know, when he was on Newsnight with Paxman. And watching it back now, thankfully, I'd like to think the Overton window has shifted, you know, partly helped by Tommy Robinson and some others. The Overton window has shifted, but you watch that back and they're just treating him like he's proper, like a Nazi.
Treating him like dirt. And, I mean, if a man is a real man, I think it's important, if presented with new evidence, to reconsider your views. So if you're one-way thinking, even for a decade, and someone actually says, hey, do you know what? Have you seen this? This changes like your whole ideology that you've been abiding by for the last 10 years. I think a real man, a strong man, will think, you know what? I've been presented with new evidence. I've changed my mind. And there's no problem saying, I got that wrong. Someone like Paxman and Morgan, how they've treated him over the years. And anybody else that they've lambasted and lied about and twisted their words and truths, they should really now, because the eye is on us all. There's no escaping like facts now, because you've got X and everyone's got CCTV on their phone and everyone's fact checking. These people should really hold themselves accountable and say, do you know what? I got that wrong. I'm not perfect. On to the next.
It wouldn't be lovely if more people did that, right? And it's like, you know, Keir Starmer, I'll come on to him later, but the amount of lies that man tells, right? There's been a couple where he's just got it genuinely wrong, right? If he'd have come out and said, do you know what? I got that wrong. I don't think politicians realise that the public would appreciate that.
I think the sooner people stop pretending they're perfect, the better. Because,
100%.
I mean, I see the country now full of people slamming people for things that they're guilty of themselves. It's like, fucking hell, am I the only one paying attention here? Yeah. Let's talk about some media outlets. Well, in fact, you tell me, are there any media outlets, mainstream, that you trust?
That I trust? No. And I'll be honest with you on this, because I think it's healthy to have your kind of baseline is not to trust anything that you see, not to trust anything that you read, even if it's a station. Of course, I'm not just saying this because I appear on GB News, but I do watch GB News. I tend not to watch. I watch the BBC because I feel like I have to. Right, I want to make sure that I do hear what the enemy are saying and what they're talking about. Not the enemy, but you know what I mean. But I don't really trust, and I honestly, anyone watching this, everyone should be like this in my view. Even if you think you trust that media outlet, don't. Just treat everything that you see with suspicion, and that accounts for everything. You know, independent media, mainstream media. You got to treat everything with suspicion, because it's healthy for you to then think about what you're hearing and then to do a bit of research to try and make sure. And sometimes you're not going to get a clear answer. But in those situations, I'm more likely to believe someone like GB News than I would. I don't believe a word that comes out of the BBC. The BBC is an awful, vile, horrific organisation that's well past its sell-by date. And there is no place in any country, in my view, where someone should be potentially put in prison because you don't want to watch state television. It's utter nonsense.
It's insane.
It's batshit. You tell Americans about this, and they're just like, "What the fuck, man?"
Yeah.
It just doesn't compute.
And they haven't even got a sense of humour. No. But even they find that funny.
It's true.
What about like Telegraph, Mail, Independent? Any particular papers that you think, okay, that's a decent source?
I quite like the Telegraph. I have a subscription with the Telegraph, one of them cheap online ones. I read as much as possible. I listen to all. To be honest, I will listen to BBC Radio. I will watch the BBC, mainly to scowl at it and clip it and put it on social media. Yeah. But I do watch it.
Debunk it.
Yeah, just purely to debunk it. I mean, I don't want to sort of jump too far back, but that's what brought me to prominence on social media.
Going back to trust, who we do and don't trust. And I'll move to reform after, but
okay.
Do you trust Nigel Farage?
I have been bitten more than once with thinking that I trust politicians. I thought I trusted Boris Johnson. You might laugh, and I will laugh at myself for saying that now.
He was very charming.
I thought he was a fantastic orator. I thought he had his flaws.
He's not lacking charisma, that's for sure.
Exactly. And I believed that he was determined to deliver Brexit properly. And there was a good reason for that, because if you remember, he prorogued Parliament, right? He properly dropped a hand grenade, right, and went, right, well, if you're just going to vote against me, I'm just going to shut Parliament down. I was like, get in, Boris. That was quality. And then it turned out he fluffed it, and he was a bit of a lefty, and he loved net zero. And what did it for me with Boris was I voted, not just because of Brexit, I voted for Boris, and I will say for Boris, because it was for Boris, because at the time, even though I was a Conservative, I wasn't particularly happy with the Conservative Party as a whole, because to me, half of them were Lib Dems. I mean, I picked up on that quite early on. But Boris Johnson promised, and I kind of campaigned as a member of the Conservative Party at the time, promised that he was going to reduce immigration. The first thing that he did when he got into office was him and Priti Patel lowered the salary threshold and opened the floodgates. I wasn't even aware of that at the time. It skipped past me. It was only, after Boris had left and we started to analyse what he did when he was in office that we then realised, and of course it was in the papers, it went back and we'd seen it, Boris and Priti Patel have lowered the salary threshold, but it was because we just literally won Brexit and everything, it kind of just got lost it certainly did to me anyway. And then to find out that he basically just lied. The bloke just lied. Absolute point blank lie. So when you ask me, do I trust Nigel Farage, right? If I was to pick any politician that I was going to put my weight behind, it will 100% be that man out of the current crop of politicians that we've got. He represents to me the fight that absolutely we need to have in this country. He's anti-DEI. He's anti-woke. He wants to bring government spending down. He's what I would call a more traditional, proper conservative with proper conservative values. Is he perfect? No, he's not. I know people who know Nigel Farage, and I've not met him personally because our paths have never crossed at GB News, unfortunately. Although I might be meeting him at some point soon, actually. But he... all I've heard is nice things about him.
Yeah, you better not slag him off too much then.
Yeah. I'm not saying that just because I might be meeting him soon. But no, I have genuinely heard through people that he's got all the time in the world for you. You know, he's a nice guy. That doesn't mean a huge amount, you know, in the long term. Is he a liability? Probably yes, a little bit. I'm not going to lie. A lot of people have got criticisms about, and I've done a few spaces. There's some really good spaces online. I've only just started getting into them, actually.
On X?
On X, a couple of spaces that I've done where you speak to real people, you know, and listen to what they're saying about reform. And they've got some really quite legit criticisms of Nigel Farage. Politics is a team game, right? Nigel Farage, even though he probably likes to think he plays as a team, works a team, it's very evident to everybody around him that he is definitely the boss and he is definitely the decision maker. And if you cross him, you're probably not going to last very long, as Ben Habib and Rupert Lowe found out.
Well, we're going to move on to them, but going back through all the things you've just spoke about, so I blame Boris for Starmer being where he is. If Boris wasn't so appalling and dishonest, it would never have led to Labour getting in power, and we wouldn't be subjected to the Starmer regime, which is, quite frankly, a depressing...
Worse than I ever imagined.
Far beyond my wildest imagination. He's just I find him utterly disingenuous and repugnant. But that aside...
I don't disagree in the slightest.
Do you think reform can save the UK?
What a massive question. I think they've got the best chance of saving the UK. This is the way I look at it, right? For me, we've had 100 years in this country of entitled two-party rule between the Conservative Party and the Labour Party. Reform, for me, if we can break, so let me just put this to you, right? Imagine it's 2029, right? The exit polls come in, and Nigel Farage's face is number one, and Reform look like they're going to have the largest party, and then they go on to be the largest party in 2029, which I think is plus 70% chance of happening, in my view. That will send shockwaves through this country. They don't believe it, right? All the left. They don't think he's got a chance. I'm sure the polls are probably making them think differently, sort of. But just the showing the British public that a third party can win an election, that it doesn't have to be Labour or Conservative, will be profound for this country. So whether you like reform or not, the way I see it is they have got to win the next election. I mean, it's to me, it's life and death. They have to win the next election. If they turn out to be exactly the same as the Tories and have lied their way, they will get annihilated and we will hold them to account. So what I say to people is this. I say, give reform a chance, right? Don't prejudge something you don't know, right? They're not tested. That's part of their appeal, and it's also part of their weakness, right? The fact that they haven't held office yet. Let's get them into government. Let's show this country that it doesn't have to be a Labour or Conservative. That the uni party, to me, I don't want. I just want them to be destroyed completely. Now, if we can just get that one thing done, right? That one thing done. If we can just kill the uni party in an election, that will profoundly change this country, and it will change how voters are already thinking differently, right? So voters are much more promiscuous, right? They're much happier now to consider voting for a third party. It is already changing. The political landscape is already changing. Now, if you add to that an election win, a general election win, where Nigel Farage becomes Prime Minister, I mean, I'm laughing, but the thought of that, the thought of seeing their faces, the thought of the absolute meltdown, the colossal. I mean, look what happened after Brexit. When the civil service lost the Brexit vote, they were crying in the corridors. Right, it's 100% true. They were literally dropping and crying. Just imagine if Nigel Farage becomes Prime Minister. People will be in counselling.
It'll be a bit of a rerun from the States when the Democrats would just laughed at the idea of Trump getting into the White House, and then all of a sudden, wallop.
Exactly. Now, the reason I'm saying that specifically is because now you can split this off, right? That goal of breaking that uni party is number one. That's step number one. And that's a big one, right? That's the big one. If we can break that uni party and show the country that there's a third option, a proper third option, one that cares about Britain, one that's going to clearly put the British people first, And hopefully, if Nigel Farage does even half of the things that he said he's going to do, he'll make this country a much better place. Now, do I trust Farage to deliver? Do I think that they're going to? I honestly don't know. I honestly don't know. Do I think that? Do I think that they've got the right mindset to deliver? Yes, I do. But I agree with the criticisms that people have got about Nigel Farage. I agree with them, and I agree with Rupert Lowe.
Do you think Rupert Lowe's dismissal was justified?
Yes, actually. I like Rupert Lowe a lot, and I've done a couple of podcasts with him, so I'm very close with him, but I know him. And I have actually directly called him out on this. But at the same time, I know where he's coming from. Right. So the reason, what Rupert said to me anyway, is that how this all started is that Rupert basically wanted some FaceTime with Nigel Farage. And he'd been desperately trying to get a meeting with Nigel Farage. Now, this is if this is true, this is incredibly poor party management on Nigel Farage's point. And from the people I've heard, who, by the way, still say he's a nice guy, this is quite like Farage, right? So Farage made a huge mistake, in my view, bad party management, by not listening to Rupert Lowe to start with, right? So if anyone kind of started this, if you want to go back to who started it, Farage probably should have spent a bit more time with Rupert Lowe and listened to his concerns. What Rupert Lowe did after that, I think, was unforgivable. And I've told him this. I've said to him, and this is the way I put it, right? I said, you're a CEO. You're a wealthy man. You've run businesses. Imagine you just hired a PR person, right? And then the day after you've hired that PR person, after experiencing your company, they go straight to the Daily Mail and they write an article about you and your company, and they basically slag it off. What would you do? And he said, I'd sack them. I said, exactly. I said, you should have not done that. Especially before the local elections, right? Because it's not just Nigel Farage. And this is where I criticise Rupert Lowe. I think he's great. I think he's a breath of fresh air. I would love him to be kiss and make up, back in reform, back in the fold. It's not going to happen, but that's where so I'm not saying this from a point of being that I don't like Rupert Lowe. Far from it. I think he's brilliant.
Did you, or you probably did notice, but Nigel Farage said that he would sooner eat razor blades than welcome back Rupert Lowe.
I expected that. It's because Rupert has burnt the bridges, and he's deliberately burnt the bridges. Now, I'm not saying that that's a bad thing. That's the way that they treated Rupert Lowe, the way Reform responded to that article was nothing short of disgusting. I mean, it wouldn't change. There is no other option, so it wouldn't make me sort of not vote for them.
What about 𝐸𝐿𝐸𝐻's conduct? And let me say what I mean by conduct.
Yeah.
Actually having one of his own team players arrested for words he didn't like. Now, when you get somebody arrested, that's with the intention to get them charged, convicted, and sent to jail. So they had a disagreement. There was a clash of words. There was disagreement. There was an argument. Who gives a shit how heated it was? 𝐸𝐿𝐸𝐻 wanted Rupert Lowe to go to jail. What do you think of that?
I think it's disgusting.
That's insane.
I think it's unforgivable. And it's embarrassing, right? It's embarrassing because we're not like that, right? The right are not like that. We don't call the police on people because they've had a few tough words with you. I mean, you're about the same age as me. When we grew up, that just wasn't the done thing, was it? If you have a bit of a Barney, someone in the pub, it just stays there and it's done, right?
How could we, as the British public, trust a man that wanted one of his own team players sent to jail for something he didn't agree with, or they had a clash that didn't suit him, that made him feel a little bit uneasy?
Yeah, I mean...
Trust is gone.
But you got to just remember who 𝐸𝐿𝐸𝐻 is, right? He is not a politician. This is brand new to him, like completely brand new to him. I've been in politics probably longer than he has. I mean, for me, I did quite like 𝐸𝐿𝐸𝐻 prior to him. But when I heard that he called the police on Rupert Lowe, I was like, fuck, what?
For me, that was game over.
That was a big turning point for me.
Yeah, it was disappointing. And whenever I'm sort of weighing up someone's personality, because you can always overlook some bad things if they do one or two good things, but I always think to myself, remember this, Liam, Fred West was a great builder. But I can't judge him on building houses. I've got to judge him on the fucking people he killed.
Good point.
So let's talk about Robert Jenrick, because he reminds me a little bit of Rupert Lowe. They're kind of cut from the same cloth. They're speaking out more. They're being more vocal with their sort of right-wing policies, and they seem unapologetic about that, which is great. And Jenrick is currently covering the rise of Islamists in British jails. I mean, we've had prison officers being seriously assaulted recently. I think we're now on number 4 or 5. boiling water over them, oil, multiple stabbings, terrorists loose on the wing. Now, I've known about the rise of Islamists in jails for years and years and years. I mean, just being in the public eye, you get first-hand information. You get eyewitness statements from people that have been released from jail, and you get people that are keeping their eye close on the ball. I like what 𝐿MT's doing. What's your opinion? Is he jumping on the bandwagon? Does he mean it? Is he doing it for votes? Is it too little too late? Should he be saying, Tommy Robinson was saying this 15 years ago, I'm grateful for that because it's now allowed me to do it without being lambasted and chastised in the media and in Parliament.
I'll tell you what, that would be politically genius if he did that, because that would pull the rug right under Farage in some respects.
Interesting one, isn't it?
Yeah, very interesting. I've not thought about it like that. But generic, I mean, do you know, his nickname in Parliament was generic, right, when he was there. So he didn't really have a political philosophy of sorts, right? So he's... but I do like the guy. I've got to admit, I really like his media work at the moment. It's top notch. I mean...
I'm thoroughly enjoying it.
I'm very much the same, yeah.
But I like people giving credit where it's due. 100%. And I just wish people be more honest and just say, do you know what? Because you done X, Y, I'm now able to do Z. Thank you. I'll take the baton and I'll run with it, and we'll get these Islamists under control in our jails. But thank you for giving me the space to do it.
Yeah.
But they seem, a lot of politicians, and there's a lot of journalists as well, I'm not going to name them, but a lot of people take credit for other people's hard work, and they just sort of come in and finish the job off, and they're the one that get the cheer. I'm like, come on now.
Pretty much what Labour have been doing since they got into office, taking credit. Anything that's good, they'll take credit for, but actually it was the Tories. You know? Yeah, I mean, with the Islamist thing in prisons, there was one thing I wanted to make a point about that, is that, you know, when I heard Tommy Robinson had been put back in prison for contempt of court, and he'd gone to solitary confinement, which, of course, for a civil offence, you know, you'd think that's a bit strong. And then, of course, you're hearing from people that the reason he's doing that, the reason they're putting him in solitary confinement is for his own safety. And I thought, you know, what? I know, I'm not naive. I know what goes on in prisons, and I know that there is a certain element that I've known about the Islamist problem in prisons. You know, people converting to Islam because they're shit scared of getting beaten up, stuff like that. But what really aggravates me, along with all of the other things that is wrong with this country right now, is that should not be the case, right? We should not be putting someone who's committed a civil offence in solitary confinement because they can't control those prisons. That's what really, really pisses me off. It's submission, isn't it? It's just saying,
you win,
crack on. No, we're British. We don't do things like that. You go in there and you sort it out. That's the problem. If necessary, you protect him, right? It's his right not to be locked up in solitary confinement for a civil offence. Really makes me angry that we just give up and let these Islamists just take control of the prison. I mean, I don't know exactly what it's like, because I'm not in prison with him, but we've all seen, you know, documentaries, etc., of what it's like in prison, and they shouldn't be able to get away with that. It just shouldn't be the case. Lock them all down. Let Tommy have the full... If that's how they're going to be, let him have the free areas in prison. Lock the rest of them down. It shouldn't be the way. And it's kind of a reflection of our own society in some respects. You know, you think about... there's people who, for example, when we had all of the hate marches in London, thank God they've died down a little bit. But, you know, every single weekend we've had hate marches. One solitary person, no threat to anyone, are going to hold up a sign saying Hamas are terrorists. The police will arrest them. They're not going to arrest the group because they're outnumbered and they're too scared. And to me, that's the same as what's going on in the prisons. It's an abomination. And I don't like it. I don't like the fact that we're submitting to it.
It's frightening. And when terrorists are getting preferential treatment and they're getting put to the front of the queue and made a priority over our own citizens, I mean, something is monumentally wrong.
100% wrong. And you know, looking at the Lucy Connolly case, for example, terrorists, murderers, paedophiles, they all get a day release or whatever it is. It's fine for them to get it. But if you tweet something, you know, a little bit spicy on Twitter and then delete it 3 hours later, you don't get fuck all. You get held on remand from the moment you hand yourself into the police, and the poor woman's been kept away from her daughter, and they've denied her all of these rights. it's just we live in a completely two-tier society on every single aspect, and this is all part of it. It's all part of appeasement, and it's all part of, you know, not wanting to offend people and being politically correct. It's all bullshit, and it's breaking down society. British society is breaking down, and it's getting worse. That's what drives me. You know, that it's seeing all this happen. I want to shout and scream about it to the top of my lungs. I want to talk about two-tier sentencing as much as possible. You know, 𝐸𝐿𝐻𝐿 was great on this, by the way. 𝐸𝐿𝐻𝐿 was fantastic with that. Properly got the hop on reform with that one. You know, to find out that they were literally going to, based on the colour of your skin, no other reason, but if you come from an ethnic minority, they'll be more lenient with you when it comes to sentencing. That's not British either. It's just not the way we do things. It's going back to the question you said to me, what am I proud of?
Certainly not that.
Well, yeah, I was proud of a you know, Lady Justice. She wears a blindfold, and there's a reason for that, because justice should be blind. It doesn't matter whether you're poor, rich, ethnic minority, white Brit. It shouldn't matter. Everyone should get treated the same. Everyone.
Totally agree.
And that is not happening, and it's getting worse.
All those political prisoners, and I know this firsthand, I've spoke to families of people whose partners are in jail, being terrorised on the wing, might I add, by Islamists. They were all encouraged, we use the word encouraged, to plead guilty. Otherwise they were threatened with a far heftier sentence. So when people say, Lucy Connolly pled guilty, she's guilty, it's like, no. She was forced. Okay, she was
and probably
encouraged.
terrified.
She was terrified out of her wits. Yeah. She's not a criminal. No. She's never been arrested before, as far as I know, in her life. Certainly not been to jail. So just imagine if Lucy Connolly commits suicide. And I would say that she's a contender. I would say it's so distressing and so frightening. She's not used to that environment. They're pretty heavy duty going in there. Imagine if she was to take her own life. How would Labour deal with that? What would happen to the country, do you think, if that was to happen?
Well, we already had one person take their own life.
Peter
Lynch. And I don't use hate often. I really don't. And I don't use the word evil often.
Me neither.
But those people who follow me on Twitter have noticed that I probably have used it recently. Because I think Keir Starmer is evil. He's vacuous. He's an idiot. But there are elements of him that are evil. Because I couldn't sleep at night knowing that.
Me neither.
I'd do everything I could. Even if it was someone who's a Labour, because Lucy herself, she's not even that political, is she? It's her husband who's a councillor,
conservative, wasn't he?
Conservative councillor, yeah. Funnily enough,
that's a coincidence.
What a coincidence! But I just couldn't. That's why I think he's evil.
That's someone's mum, someone's wife.
Exactly,
that's actually a very innocent person that said how she felt for all she cared.
Some on the left laugh at the label political prisoner. That's exactly Wayne O'Rourke? He was put away for 3 years.
I don't know too much about him.
He said
What's his story?
He said a couple of spicy things. I think one of them was he was, I suppose you could, I don't think anyone, by the way, I just want to make clear, right? I don't think anyone should go to prison for inciting violence through words. I just don't. That's a fine, maybe, a chat, something on your record. Prison time, I do not agree with for speech. I just don't agree with it. Wayne O'Rourke said a couple of things that I would consider to be slightly more direct, or at least closer to incitement than Lucy.
Right.
But it wasn't. I don't think it was that bad. It was bad.
But that said, he didn't stand a chance at the time. Then
no. And as far as I'm aware, I've seen a few people as well that have been involved in the court cases for certainly for Lucy Connolly. There was no evidence. I think it was Andrew Doyle actually. There was no evidence that showed that the words that she put out on Twitter actually directly led to any violence. They couldn't. You might argue that, yeah, of course they went through and they attacked that hotel, but there was no direct link between what she put out and what actually happened. And they threw the book at her. And this is why she's labelled as a political prisoner, because Keir Starmer is using her as an example to scare the shit out of the rest of us so we think before we tweet.
Which is my next question. Does it make you think twice about what you tweet?
For about a day, it did, but I'm a stubborn bastard, right? And Are you
prepared to go to jail for your beliefs?
100%. Without a doubt. Yeah, without a doubt. I've got a daughter. I don't want to go to jail.
But you also don't want to growing up in what Britain could look like in 10 years.
Exactly that. Exactly that.
That's where I'm at.
So, I mean, I'll be honest, right? I don't tweet to be provocative most of the time. Most of the time.
Unless it's after PMQs.
Yeah, exactly. I'll let the fuckers have it then. But no, I know this might sound cheesy, but I genuinely tweet what I think. I tweet what I think, and I say what I think. And when I don't have a boss, I'm lucky, right? I've run my own business for a long time. I'm okay. I don't have to worry about being sacked by anybody. I feel incredibly privileged to be in that position, because most people I know aren't in that position, and they do have to worry. So if I was employed by someone, I wouldn't be able to tweet the things that I tweet or say the things through fear of potentially losing my job. I don't like that, but you've got to pay your bills, you've got to pay for your mortgage, and if you've got kids, you've got to bring them up, right? So that's what's important. But when this all kicked off, and Keir Starmer was calling everybody far right who cared about immigration, and who was absolutely devastated what happened to those girls at Southport. I'm sure you were. I was in bits. I'm not going to lie.
Cried.
Yeah, same. All I could do is think about my daughter. I think all of us, the entire nation, was a tinderbox. The moment that happened, I know I was. And that's why I understand, kind of where Lucy Conlon, and for God's sake, the woman had lost a child as well through the NHS, so even more profound for her in terms of what she was going through. But Keir Starmer, he called everyone far right, and everyone started to shit themselves because we were all worried about whether we were going to be put in prison for what we were tweeting. And I'm not going to lie, for maybe a day, I did think long and hard about whether I was going to fight back against this or I was going to temper what I was going to say. And maybe a couple of tweets I did probably temper a little bit what I was putting out there. Not anymore. And I promise you that is the case. I don't give a shit. I will tweet exactly what I think, and I will tweet things I believe in and want to talk about. I was very vocal on the hate marches, and they are hate marches. The Islamists that were taking over London every weekend. I was a little bit concerned, that might get me into some hot water. Touch wood.
Yeah, I think the way Starmer is using lawfare, I think tweeting about the pro-Palestine marches, if you're opposing them, would definitely make you a contender for jail.
I am a little bit shocked that I haven't had a tap on the door or anything like that.
I'm glad you're here.
Yeah.
For my American viewers and listeners, and even non-believers in the UK, does free speech exist in the UK?
No, not at the moment. It doesn't. It's almost the same sort of question you asked me whether I trust our institutions. I want to trust them, but I can't. I want to say we've got free speech because we have a history of it, as Keir Starmer rightly said, history being the operative word.
He was proud of it, he said.
Proud history, lying bastard.
And he'll fight to protect our free speech, something else he said.
Yeah, that's another lie that he told.
Trump wasn't swallowing that lie, was he?
No, nor was J.D. Vance.
No, that was embarrassing for Starmer. Now, talking about Trump. So Elon Musk has recently has gone to war with Donald Trump.
Yeah.
Said he's on the Epstein flight log. We know what he's insinuating by that. What are your thoughts on that whole battle between Musk and Trump?
I'm a little bit gutted, I suppose, because I kind of liked the team. I thought it was a really good mix of the two. One's a politician, one's a businessman, the other one's got massive control over social media. In fact, to be fair, so's Trump. But, characters. So I'm a little bit gutted that it's hit to blows. But isn't it fascinating? It's good political theatre, without a doubt. I think my views on it are, part of me actually, if I reflect on it, thinks that it was inevitable, almost. Two massive, a bit like Rupert Lowe and Nigel Farage, you could argue. It's all about ego politics.
The battle of the billionaires.
Exactly. But one thing I do know about Elon Musk, I really like Elon Musk. I think the thing that he's done, the thing that he did with Twitter to spend, what was it, 44 billion, paid probably 12, 15 billion over the odds, over the value of Twitter, to basically stop the left dominating it. I mean, the guy's a hero, an absolute hero, because without him, I don't think we would have had the conversations we had around Southport. No. I don't think we would have had some of the conversations we're having about the hate marches, because I know for a fact I was shadow banned on old Twitter 100% I was shadow
And a lot of people would still be reading the Daily Rag, the mainstream media, believing every word that they've read, and then people are getting poorly judged for things that they've never done.
Yeah, and actually, funny enough, now you've said that, prior to Twitter being taken over by Elon Musk, I did watch what I tweeted a lot. I don't know if you were the same, but I certainly did, because I just didn't want to get suppressed.
I've been cancelled 3 times.
Have you?
So I kind of have to be relatively careful,
Yeah,
but not too careful.
This is kind of, I hope I'm not going too off topic on this, but this is kind of why I don't like it that much when people slag GB News off for being Ofcom friendly. Now, the way I see it, and it's the same things that the right do on YouTube, right? So the right will say, we need to be on YouTube. We've got to be on the pitch. So what we'll do, we are going to kind of temper what we do. And they'll say this openly on Twitter. I'm thinking of Carl Benjamin, potentially. Fantastic podcast. But he will openly admit that he will temper what he says on YouTube to make sure his YouTube channel stays relevant.
Yeah,
right?
same as me. I can't get important messages and stories out there if I haven't got a platform to do it.
Exactly.
So I play by the rules.
So you play by the rules. That's what GB News is doing, right? If GB News aren't on the pitch, then the normies will then again own the television media landscape, without a doubt. GB News is hugely important for that reason. So, and again, I'm a huge fan of Dan Wootton, huge fan of Lawrence. I've actually interviewed Lawrence on a podcast. But I think they're both fantastic. I think they're great. But I don't like it when they kind of slag off GB News for being Ofcom compliant. Well, if you want to be on the pitch, you have to be Ofcom compliant. Ofcom can pull your licence and you're not on mainstream media anymore. Now, I agree with their comeback, right? So it's a bit of an odd position then, because they'll say to me, we don't want to be on the pitch, right? Independent media is where it's at. We don't care about mainstream anymore. They're absolutely right. I completely agree with that. But there's still a pitch.
I think we need some players on that pitch.
100,
don't just alienate yourselves completely. I mean, not that Farage would give a monkey's fart what I think or feel, but as much as there's no other political party I'll be voting for, but some things that Farage has done I strongly disagree with, and I've held him to account as best I can. So people have seen, and it's had millions of hits, some of the things I've said about Farage, his lies in particular. I'm not going to rehash that and bring it back up again.
But fair criticism.
Fair criticism, and I am fair, but I think we should pull together far more. But also, if there's someone steering the ship and they're promising us hope and glory, okay, fine, we're going to put our trust in you, but I've got to hold you to account. If I see you do something that I think you're deceiving me or tricking me or there's dishonesty, because we are fucking sick of being lied to. That, I think the main number one, certainly my bone of contention is with politicians, I'm sick of being treated like an idiot, like a moron. Don't lie to me. If you've got it wrong or you don't know, say it. I'll certainly find more strength in that than you winging it and lying about people to further your own career. It's shit business. But going back to, in fact, fresh question.
Go on.
Is Britain, by and large, a racist country?
No. Britain is the most tolerant, welcoming, wonderful country gifted to the earth. I love this country. I haven't done a huge amount of travelling, but I have been around the world. No other country matches our country in terms of the way that we are. Again, I'm saying things that aren't are broken, but our rule of law, our fairness, our openness. We have not, we're not a racist country. Of course, there are racist people. Of course, there are. You'd be an idiot to say otherwise.
I was sort of thinking more towards white people.
Yeah, that's a fair point as well.
I've never considered racism until I was collared in London at an event, United Kingdom.
I was there?
Yeah, the Trafalgar Square one.
Uh-huh.
So I was collared by an independent journalist, and they was asking me questions, and they said to me, the same question I asked you, is Britain by and large a racist country? And I contested and pushed back. I said, absolutely not. I said, racism simply doesn't exist. We just want fair treatment, and anyone that's going to come in, accepts our culture, contribute, love each other, unite the kingdom. So I went on this big spiel basically saying that racism doesn't exist in the UK. And then I re-signed up to Twitter, as we know is X. And it took me 3 months to realise, shit, there is a little bit of racism out there, but It's against white people.
Yeah.
Am I misreading that?
No, you're not.
Because I don't want to come across like I'm misreading the room, but I mean, it seems like white-skinned people now are the ones under attack. And for the record, I couldn't give a flying fish's tit. In fact, no problem. If you don't like me because I'm white or bald or whatever, cool. That says everything about you, not a great deal about me.
Absolutely.
Other than I'm white and bald, which is pretty obvious. But yeah, I don't care. But I've just noticed that it seems that it's the white people that are getting the hard end of the stick at the moment. Do you agree?
100. Yeah, no, I completely agree. Look, Britain isn't a racist country, and you are right in your first answer, but you're also right to point out that it is always going the other way, and it has been for many years. Right, we've known about. I think it's come more to light now because again, people are a bit more aware and they're waking up. But it just feels that I'm not going to sort of claim white people quite the victims yet. However, it does seem that every single aspect of society is geared against white people. You look at the education system, and white working class boys are the most underperforming group of all of the complete spectrum of kids that are at school. You look at the justice system, right? We literally had to just stop the justice system sentencing white people more harshly than other. I mean, it's nuts, isn't it? I'm laughing, but it's deadly serious and terrifying at the same time.
It's good that we can laugh about it because it's actually outrageous.
It's disgusting. And this is one thing that gets a proper fire in my belly about this sort of stuff. I hate injustice. And what I hate worse is grown-ups implementing that injustice. I can't understand. How did those people, right? These people are supposed to be legal professionals, clever people, grown-ups, sitting around a room, and they all went, yeah, let's sentence white people, just treat them more harshly. It's crazy.
Imagine being in that meeting room, actually, when they come to the decision that that's a good decision. Frank, great idea. That's what we're going to do. Fuck the white people. They're getting longer in jail.
Where's the grown-ups, right? If I'd have walked into a room and heard that conversation, if you'd have walked into that room, you'd be like, guys, what the fuck are you playing at?
I would have thought it was a Monty Python sketch.
Yeah, it's not. And I can't get my head around it. And to me, that's a big eye-opener, right? Completely changes the way that I view society. I'm like, I thought, for all our faults as a country, there are people up in government, high up, who do know what they're doing, who are sensible people, and they'll keep our best interests at heart. I don't believe that anymore.
Nah, they've got their own interests at heart.
I haven't thought that for a very long time. Probably around the 2016 mark, 2010 to 2016, where I kind of woke up. That's when I realised that the people in charge are fucking idiots.
Yeah, no one's coming to save us.
No, not at all.
What about the cultural shift in the UK? Any concerns?
I find it terrifying.
Okay, so you've noticed it then.
Just a tad. Yeah, and do you know what? Another part of my life which profoundly changed my outlook was having my daughter. And I'll be honest, we didn't think we were going to be able to have kids. We were told that we couldn't. And we tried for like 5 years and probably giving you way too much information.
Oh, you come good in the end.
And we come good in the end. They got there in the end. The boys got there.
A fun 5 years.
It was definitely fun 5 years, I'll give you that. But when Lily came along, it wasn't instant, right? Because I was too busy shitting myself about being a dad. But it all of a sudden, it hit me like I remember it vividly, it just hit me like a wave. Like all of a sudden, I'm not just thinking about me. I'm not going to be here forever. My own mortality, I think, I'm talking for, I only have one kid. I'm sure as a dad, lots of dads go through this, but I realised my own mortality. I became a bit more selfless, and I accepted the fact, and all of a sudden I started to panic because I hadn't thought about it from a little girl's point of view, what she's going to grow up into. So when you ask me about this cultural shift and I see people from cultures that throw gays off buildings, treat women like shit, where women have got to walk behind their man, they've got to wear a full face veil or whatever, and they come from cultures where women are second-class citizens, there's going to be a clash at some point. We're seeing that. We're seeing it unfold in the UK right now. There's certain crimes, for example, that never used to happen in the UK, like acid attacks, never used to be a big thing. And as soon as we start importing people who don't share our values and come from a different culture, all of a sudden, acid attacks are going up. Women feel less safe than they do because of there's just sheer scale of immigration that are coming from countries that don't share our values.
And I ask every woman I speak to, and especially women of age, I like to get their take because once upon a time they could walk freely down the road in a short skirt and not care.
Maybe get a wolf whistle. That's illegal
wolf whistle.
now.
Cheers, lads. It gave it boosted their confidence, and they were going lay in a field by themselves on a blanket and just relax and enjoy the comforts of the country. And now when I ask them, how do you genuinely feel? Frightened, scared, nervous, anxious. It's the same every single time. Yeah. Why? They give me the same answer. They don't know who they're walking amongst anymore. Yeah. That's sad.
I don't want my daughter to grow up in a country where that's something for her to worry about.
And why do you think Starmer hasn't smashed the gangs? Now, he likes to tell us he's going to smash the gangs. Why do you think he's not done so? Why are we still getting record rates of migrants crossing the channel?
I've tried to think this through a few times. I can't work out whether he lied from the start and he knew that it wasn't going to he was never going to stop the boats by smashing the gangs, or whether he's stupid and he genuinely thinks that is some logical way to do it. I can't work out, or whether he's ideologically pro having those boats over. I don't think that he's pro small boats. However, I also don't think that he has the first clue or knows what he's doing to fix it. He's arrogant. I mean, he appointed, I think his name's Simon Hewitt or something like that. I could be wrong. He appointed his head of border command. The first interview that chap did, to be fair, it wasn't Keir Starmer that directly appointed him, but it was a Labour government that appointed this chap to run border command or whatever. It's just basically just rebranded stuff that we were doing already. First thing he said in public was, you are never going to stop the boats without a deterrent, as in smashing the gangs. He was quite specific. He said that smashing the gangs on its own is never going to work. And I remember the day it hit the headlines, and it was obviously a massive embarrassment for Keir Starmer. I think he knows that he's not going to succeed in what he's doing. And like other politicians before him, it's effectively, he's probably calculated that he can boot it, miscalculated that he can maybe do what previous politicians have done and just boot it into the long grass or make it look like you're trying to do something, but actually you're not doing anything.
If you get rid of the incentive, surely if okay, right, we're stopping the benefits now, and then he actually provides the evidence that, benefits are stopped now. If you come over illegally, there's no benefits. Yeah. So if there's nothing to come over here for, surely they won't come over here. And then you may stand a chance smashing the gangs. He's got no intention of smashing those gangs at all.
He's not going to do it because he's weak-willed. He hasn't got the balls to do it. And I think he's ideologically opposed to doing that sort of thing. This guy's a human rights lawyer. He stood up for all kinds of terrorists and all sorts of people.
He's not for the country, is he?
No, not at all.
He's not for the country.
He hates this country.
Despises it.
The reason it bugs me, the reason I find it so frustrating, probably the same reason everyone finds this so frustrating, is we all know that if we really wanted to, we could stop those boats in less than 5 days. And what the idiots didn't think about when they were slagging off Rwanda, I had my own problems with Rwanda, right? It was a flawed policy. Because Rishi Sunak and the Tories are wets and they watered it down so much, it would still end up being caught up in the courts. But the principle of sending someone to a third country to be processed was sound, right? That does work. The Australians have done it. There's been other studies that's done it. Plus, our security services said specifically, that's what you need. You need that deterrent, like a third-party processing deterrent, and you need carry on smashing the gangs upstream. We were always doing that. Starmer tries to make out it's a new thing we do. It's not new. We've always smashed the gangs, and we tried to, and we've always cooperated up with our European partners. Nothing has changed. Nothing's changed. So he's just doing what we already did already. But I just don't understand. This is partly why I want to smash the uni party, right? It's because they're so institutionalised. They would never do what it takes to get the job done. If they were going to do it, they would have done it by now. Tories had, 14 years, Labour 13 prior to that. If they were going to, do what needs to be done, put the Navy in the Channel, do what you said, you stop all the benefits, you stop the incentives, you say to them, The moment you step foot into the UK illegally, you are permanently barred. I think the Tories actually floated this policy at one point. I don't know whether they actually did it in the end. I think they called the election in the end, and it never got put through. But say if you come to this country illegally, you will never ever become a citizen of this country, or you'll get barred for good. That's what it takes. You need someone to implement a policy like that. You need to put the Navy in the Channel, give it 5 days, and the boats will stop. And guess what happens to Rwanda after that? You don't send people to Rwanda. So, yeah, I know we've got a backlog. There's about a million, as Nigel Farage just found out, there's 1 million illegal immigrants in this country that should be deported. I completely agree with transport. If you're here illegally, you should be deported. This is where I agree with Rupert Lowe on this. I don't mind saying the word mass deportations, because that's essentially what it is. Does mass deportations mean taking 1 million people up to the border and just ferrying them out one after another constantly? No, that's not what mass deportations mean. What mass deportations to me means is what Trump's doing.
A gradual process, but we're getting them out.
But you're getting them out, you're starting it, but everybody, if you are here illegally, at some point we are coming for you. That's what the Americans did, right? They put a direct message out and said, we're coming for you, and we're going to get, if you're a criminal especially as well, but if you're here in this country, we're going to get to you eventually. Why don't our leaders do this sort of thing? Why don't they put the British people first? It doesn't make any sense to me. The first duty of any government is to keep their citizens safe. And we've got actual terrorists crossing the channel. We know this to be true. In fact, it wasn't that long ago, we had some Iranian terrorists plot that was stopped by the Met or something. They came over on small boats. We had, years ago, we had a manhunt for 6 ISIS members. They'd come across on small boats as well. Now, for me, if I don't know how to run a country, and God forbid I ever did, right, because it'd be in the shit. But if I was in charge at that point and one terrorist had come over, one, I would have stopped the boats before that. But if I got a sniff, that would be my excuse, right? I could tell the public, right, now we're going to do what we've had these terrorists come across the channel. We're going to send the Navy out. We have a right. All these people, all these clever people that turn around and say, oh, no, you can't do that. The Navy can't do that. Bullshit. We have a right to defend our shores. Without a doubt, every country does. We are a sovereign nation, and we have the right to stop terrorists and people who hate our country coming across the channel. Now, I'm not saying that everyone crossing the channel hates our country, but I would say 99% plus are economic migrants, and there's going to be a section of them that want to do us harm, who don't share our values, and the fact that they're breaking into a country they shouldn't be here in the first place.
That could actually be forming their own attack privately.
Yeah.
Subtly, covertly, ready to strike, and I can't believe that people aren't talking about this out loud.
It's a battalion.
Yeah. They're here.
Yeah.
They don't need to invade. They've done that already. And all they've now got to do is strike when the time's right. And what did you think when Starmer recently essentially said that all British citizens need to be war ready? Who on earth does he fucking think he is? Who's going to want to go and fight for Keir Starmer?
Yeah, that is a tricky one for me. I am desperately patriotic, and I love this country, and I've thought about this question a lot. Would I fight for this country? Would I fight for Keir Starmer? Would I fuck? I don't like the man. I hate him. I think he hates this country, and I want him out of office as soon as possible. But if this country came under attack and we needed to step up to save our country, to save our way of life, to save my daughter's future, I'd fight. So I hear the people that say they wouldn't. I totally do. I hear them because I feel the same in some respects. But honestly, if you want me to honestly answer that question, I can only answer it in the way that I understand that question. And for me, if this country was being invaded, of course I would. I'm sure there's people watching this going, no, you fucking wouldn't. But I would.
And you know the irony as well from Starmer's point of view? If we did go to war, who do you think the first people Starmer would call for? The people that he's imprisoned?
Yeah, probably.
The working class Brits that he's forgotten about and denounced, trampled and stamped on and pissed on and took away their liberty.
Yeah.
Fucking animal. They would be the people that he would desperately need to fight for the country because they're the ones with the cojones.
Yeah. And I agree. So I just want to make it clear. I understand.
He makes me angry, Starmer.
Yeah,
It kills my vibe. He messes with my entire equilibrium.
We were having such a lovely chat.
Yeah.
Before. Yeah, it brings it down a little bit. That's how
Everyone
divisive
feels
he is.
the same.
Yeah, totally. Even the left hate him. I mean, he's not very popular within the party.
I think his own wife hates him.
I
I think the only people that love Starmer are
Is that
those.
even a relationship?
I think the only people that love Starmer are those rent boys, and even they had enough of him, didn't they?
Yeah, I think they did. They didn't like that, did they?
Nah.
But no, going back to I just want to make the point that the people who say, because initially it really got my back up. I'm like, how can you be a patriot if you say that you're not going to fight for this country? No matter who's in charge, I respect the office, right? I respect the office of Prime Minister of this country. It's all we got, right? You know, that's the system we have. But what are we fighting for? You know, what we had is so close to being gone. You know, if we carry on as the way we are, if you look at the birth rates, for example, you know, 1.4 children per woman, and that's going down, right? And you look at the immigration that we've got and the levels of immigration, I know it's going down a bit, but we had, 700,000 net plus come to this country last year. And if you see declining birth rates and increased migration, what do you get? You know, the British people probably won't exist. And you do ask yourself, what are we fighting for? You know, have the left, you know, brainwashed enough people in this country to hate their own country?
It'd be interesting to see what people think in the comments, how they feel about fighting for the country under Starmer's instruction. And if Starmer continues or stays in power, what do you think Labour are going to do to the police service and the actual military itself?
They're going to destroy it. They already are destroying it.
Would you encourage your daughter to join the police if she was an adult?
I'd be proud if she did. I'd be very proud if she joined the police force. I've got a lot of respect for our frontline police. I think they'd have a really tough job. It's the leadership I have a problem with.
Would you not be worried about her that she's not in good
I'd be
company?
shitting myself.
Because of the DEI recruitment process.
Yeah, I would shit myself. Yeah, but at the same time, it is an honourable profession to be a policeman. On the flip side of that, it's being ripped apart and destroyed. You know, you look at the police now. There's that copper, wasn't he? That, I can't remember his name. It was only in the paper yesterday. He was fired from being a police officer because he was a little bit mean,
swearing at a knife-wielding yob.
Exactly.
That's a potential murderer. If you're going out carrying a knife, potentially you could be a murderer, or you're just about to commit murder.
Yeah.
See, that is why I asked the question, because if I flip it back on me, so it seems like I'm being fair. My son's 18. Years ago, if he'd have said to me, I'm joining the military, I'm going to be a policeman, I'd say, good on you and good for you, I'm proud of you. That's noble, that's honourable.
Yeah.
Fair play. If he said that to me now, I'd say, please don't. If he said why, I'd say, because I don't feel like you're in safe hands anymore. I don't think those institutions really care about you anymore. I think you're cannon fodder. Who are you going to get paired up with? Remember back in the day, Cagney and Lacey, Dempsey and Magpiece, Starsky and Hutch. You knew that your wingman had your back.
Yeah.
It's like, who would my son get paired up with now if he joined the police force? Fucking Brian with dyed blue hair and a vagina.
And if you say the wrong thing, or you're a bit too aggressive with a knife-wielding maniac, you'll just get thrown under a bus.
See, that is mental.
I can't get my head. That's what I mean, right? That's what I mean about the left being so dangerous now, right? Old school Labour. Oh God, you know, a little bit of me wants them back. You know, proper old school Labour, where it was a respectable. I've never been on the left, well, not really, but I've got to respect people like Tony Benn. You know, what a great man. You know, I didn't agree with hardly anything he said, but I think, you know, his views on Brexit were fantastic. He was a real big influence on me, Tony Benn, for voting to leave the European Union. There are some respectable people on the left, but the new left, it's insidious. And they don't seem to see that everything that they're doing, it doesn't sort of attack and break things at the top, because, you know, you could almost stop that happening. You go, whoa, stop, don't break that, don't break that. They seep in over years, and they get right into the foundations of things. You look at our civil service, you look at all of our institutions and the education system. They've just, it's, you know, the Marxist takeover of the institutions and all of that. There's some truth to that. You know, they've got in amongst everything. This is why I think that this is going back to why I think it's so important that Reform win the next election. It's so important. That's not me being a fanboy of Reform. That's me being realistic. If we can break this system, if we can show that system that they've seeped into and infested with woke leftist ideology. As I said, our civil service should not have been in tears when we left the European Union.
And what's your definition of woke?
The real definition of woke, I think we'd all be a little bit woke, wouldn't we? It's to be aware of, people who are minorities, and to be aware of injustices and stuff. It all sounds kind of okay. I think if that was the true meaning of woke, I think we'd all be a little bit woke. The real meaning of woke.
You've got traditional woke and you've got modern woke.
And you've got normal, modern woke, which is what obviously we associate with, is in my view, one of the most destructive ideologies that this country has ever seen. And it's been allowed to fester for so long in this country. It's going to take a lot of time for it to be reversed. But it's almost like a religion. It's where cancel culture comes from. It's like moral superiority. It's a group of people who think that, if you don't share the acceptable view, you're a Nazi, or, you should be cancelled. They'll go, but they won't just do that. They'll go through every single thing that you've tweeted, and they'll cancel you to the core. It's mixed in. It's inherently mixed in with identity politics, and for me, I can't stand either of them. And we shouldn't be judging anybody by the way that they look or the colour of their skin. And to me, that's what woke is all about.
And notice how it creeps into celebrity, people that are loaded, privileged. They're in a solid position. They're sitting pretty, but they're polluting the minds of the viewers with that ideology, so that shit spreads. But take Gary Lineker, for example. What are your views on him and the BBC?
He's a prick.
Shoot from the hip, Lee.
I cannot stand the man. I absolutely can't. Look, people trying to attack me. Well, I thought you lot believed in free speech. I do believe in free speech, 100%. I would fight for Gary Lineker to spout as much bullshit and bollocks as he wants. I would fight for his right to do that. But he can't do that while he's at the BBC. And that's the point I've always stuck with. He's not very politically intelligent. You can tell that by the stances that he takes. I mean, some of the left who are, very pro-Palestine probably wouldn't even take some of the stances that he's taken. The guy's just an idiot. Do I think that he's doing it deliberately? No, I think he's just naturally stupid. And he wants to come across as being virtuous.
Yeah, does he actually believe what he's saying?
Part of me thinks he does. If he's pro-Palestine and all that, fine. But he's just not very bright with it. Pumping out on X, what was it, that Spurs were top of the league on October the 7th, right? And then saying, that the Hamas thing, when he was, as if it was just, don't worry about Hamas. There's only a bunch of, bloodthirsty, medieval, brutal fucking terrorists. The Hamas thing, I think he's showing obvious signs of being a little bit brainwashed himself, right? But one thing that I do think he is fully capable of understanding is the BBC Charter, right? Now, people have said to me, oh, but he's contracted, it's different. No, it's not, right? I actually went through his bloody contract, right, because I was that pissed off with him. At least what I thought was it was from a decent source, and there was because they were comparing basically his new contract to his old contract, so I could see the differences. Now he has a responsibility, even as a contractor, to not bring the BBC into disrepute, right? There are slightly laxer guidelines when it comes to social media, but that phrase, "you shall not bring the BBC into disrepute," is quite wide-ranging, because you can bring the BBC into disrepute in many ways. One of those ways is spouting that the Tories are literally like Nazis on Twitter while you are a presenter and one of the biggest faces in the BBC. Now, I hate the BBC. They should be defunded and got rid of. I will be celebrating the day that happens, and it will happen. Maybe not completely, but it will happen to a point. I will be celebrating. I hope I live to see it. But the BBC themselves, they allowed him to get away with it for so long because they, for some bizarre reason, thought he was fantastic and he was bringing the numbers in or whatever. But he was able to take the piss out of the BBC for so many times. He breached those guidelines so many times, and the BBC just did nothing about it. Absolutely nothing. And that was frustrating the hell out of me. I'm like, well, if I misbehave or breached a contract in my work, I'd be gone in a second. In fact, there probably wouldn't even be a phone call. It'd just be contract over. That's the way it is in private business. And, with Gary Lineker, what pissed me off about it is that he just didn't care what the BBC. Tim Davie, he just let Gary Lineker run rings around him. It just didn't make any sense to me. I'm not a massive football fan. I'm a bit more on the F1 side. But the people that I spoke to, there was a few that said, he's talented and stuff like that. He's quite good at it. But the other people said, I'd watch Match of the Day whether he was there or not. And if you remember, there was that, they did suspend him once. There was that one thing, and I think was it, where he said Suella Braverman or something was a Nazi on Twitter, or compared her to 1930s Germany or something like that. That the BBC finally went, probably because it wasn't because they wanted to do it, it's because they had to, because we could all see what was going on. So they suspended Gary Lineker from one show of Match of the Day, and the viewing figures went up.
And the BBC didn't learn.
No, kind of didn't really get the point.
But the BBC are morally bankrupt anyway, aren't they?
No.
One last question before the last question.
Cool.
Are you for or against capital punishment?
For, but under very strict circumstances. So if you mean a death penalty, yes, I absolutely would be for the death penalty for very specific circumstances. I think we can probably all guess what those circumstances are, and it would have to be without any doubt that that person. So when you catch someone red-handed, like for example, is it the Manchester Arena? What happened in Manchester Arena? People like that, people who want to destroy our way of life and have been caught red-handed murdering people, or I don't want to list off all the horrific crimes.
No.
You can see where I'm going. Those people who have been caught red-handed, who have taken lives or taken a life, I would quite happily. So, for example, 𝐼𝐸𝐵𝐿, I believe that I wouldn't bat an eyelid if he was given the death penalty. I'd bring it back just for him.
I would insist I was in the viewing gallery.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think crimes have got so hideous and out of control that there needs to be a far stronger deterrent, because we cannot sit back any longer and watch wholesome, innocent, lovely people get slaughtered at the hands of a fucking maniac because they're not scared of consequence. And to wrap this up, although I'm thoroughly enjoying this chat, and I could have gone, we could have done this all day.
It's like 2 minutes we've been chatting.
Yeah. So, what's your final thought of the day? What does the future hold for you, and where can people find you?
Final thought of the day. My main focus at the moment, and the message that I want to get out there, is I understand people's concerns with reform. I do. I share those concerns. But if we can just unite around that vehicle that can take us to a point where we can smash that uni party apart and show the country that a third party can win government, that is going to be a profound and necessary change for our government. So for those people that are doubting, I'm not saying saying it for people to be a fanboy of Farage or to be completely, supporting reform, but think about the bigger picture, right? If we can get reform over the line, if we can get the uni party smashed and we can break that system, then we will hold Nigel Farage and reform to account properly. We can't hold them to account based on stuff they haven't done, right? Because that's not fair. But we can hold them to account on the stuff that they do, and when if and when I believe that they win a majority at the next election, that's when we hold them to account, because it's imperative that he follows through for the future of this country, for my daughter's future, for all of our futures. It's so important that the uni party doesn't win the next election. Yeah, I mean, I can't argue with that. There's no way either of those bastards can continue destroying the country and putting us in grave danger. I think that's, people need to take that on board. Yeah. For as long as the Tories or Labour are in number 10, there's innocent people in grave danger. Yeah. It keeps me up at night. But I will say, because a lot of my viewers, they're going to be reform voters, and I would just say, stick with what you believe in, but don't think you can't hold the likes of Farage and Tice to account, because a lot of people they're hell-bent on, don't divide the right, there's too much division. It's like, no problem, nobody wants division, full stop. But if you feel like someone's steering you in the wrong direction or not being 100% authentic and honest, hold them to account out loud, because they will take notice of X. You noticed that Farage mentioned the barrage of abuse
that 𝐬𝐮𝐬𝐝 got on X.
He's paying attention.
So don't think for 1 second they're not paying attention to what the public say on X, because they are. So keep on hammering him and just be open and say, look, you've got my vote. I don't like that.
Yeah. Once we break that system, which will be probably the most significant political event that's happened in any of our lifetimes and probably will ever happen in our lifetimes, if we can just get to that point and we can show the British public that it's possible, then we hold reform to account. Then reform have teed up whatever the next, if reform isn't it, right, and I'm completely open-minded to that, because like I said, everyone I've listened to, all the people I've spoken to, both on GB News, people I've spoken to directly in Spaces, I agree with their criticisms. 90%, there's some dodgy ones, but 90% of what people are saying, I agree. But let's hold them to account when they get into power. And if it doesn't work out, and Nigel Farage, I honestly don't think this would be the case. My opinion is Farage will follow through on a lot of the things that he's saying he's going to follow through on. I can't see him not following through on scrapping DEI, for example, the things that I want to see happen. But if he does fuck it up, or he does go back on his word, do you honestly believe that the British public now, after what we've been through, or the lies that we've been told to, will put up with that? We will not put up with that. I'll be shouting to the rooftops that I will not put up with that, because that will be yet another lie, right? I was lied to by the Tories, and then if Farage does it, that will... I can't even put into words how furious I will be.
See, that's why I'll be holding him to account even before he's in power.
I do think them, I'm not disagreeing with you, because I think that's healthy, but it has bugged me a little bit. There are a couple of people, thankfully I don't think it's making much difference, who've been unnecessarily on the attack over reform. It just doesn't compute to me that to go to that level of public attacks, right? I just don't get it at this stage.
Especially if they've got big influence. I think I know who you're talking about.
A couple of people, yeah.
Feel free to name them.
Well, look, I've been a bit pissed off with Rupert Lowe, for example. Again, I love the guy. I'd love for it never to have happened. And I wish he was back on Reform's team saying the things he's saying with a Reform rosette on. I wish that was the case. But it has pissed me off that he wants to destroy the only vehicle that we've got. We are so fucking close, right? We are so close to getting rid of this uni party. It's within reaching distance. I didn't think for 1 minute I would see Reform at plus 30% on a poll of polls. To see him at 30%. That, and all these other people who are saying, well, maybe now isn't the right time. Maybe we need to, regroup and find a better reform, a better party for the right. Right, I hear you. I completely hear you. But then you have to sacrifice that 2029 election, bare minimum. So we're going to have a decade of this shit. And I ain't letting that happen. I am not letting that happen. I'll do everything in my power. I can't do much. But every time I get on the airwaves, every time I'm on GB News, every time I do BBC, I will do my best as long as I can sort of shoehorn it into a conversation.
Well, you're doing more than most, and I tip my hat to you. I mean, it's why I wanted you to come on, because I love your stance. I like what you're doing, and you're relentless, and you don't hold back. And also, I believe you. There's a lot of people that say stuff and I think that's lip service. When I see you operate, I think, I believe that guy. I believe...
It means a lot.
I believe he wants better.
I do.
I believe that.
It does mean a lot, because sometimes I've had, probably like you and a lot of people get a lot of shit on social media. People are really quite cruel,
They are very, very mean.
We get it a lot. I don't let it bother me now. I used to, but it doesn't bother me now. When you get past a certain amount of followers on X, it's very hard to keep up anyway with all of the notifications you get. So I just don't read them. I don't go through it.
You're too busy out there speaking out loud, trying to make a change. Yeah. So where can people find you so they can follow your journey?
Predominantly on X. I've tried Facebook, but they banned me for life. Not because I said something controversial, because someone's taken my identity. But cut long story short, I'm predominantly on X, addicted to number 2 news with a Z. You can find me there. You can see me on GB News relatively regularly. I'll be on again in July. I've been booked in for July. And you can also see me on, or hear me, I should say, on BBC Radio. I do, for my sins, I'll go into the enemy's den, and I'll do Jeremy Vine, and I've done Jeremy Vine a couple of times on his radio show, and I do relatively regularly on BBC Radio 5. I do the pay-per-view as well. So it's been a bit of a journey. I'll give you that. And I've just been riding a wave with it and enjoying every moment of it. But honestly, the bit that I get a kick out of is feeling like I'm adding to the national conversation in a positive way. If I feel like, and you do occasionally get that feedback, especially when you're on national television. I'm saying that I can't believe it sometimes. I get imposter syndrome. I'm sat in there in the studio, people I respect, being able to give my opinion. And that's one thing about GB News. They'll never tell you what to say or think. You go on there, of course. If you go too far, you probably won't get on again because you breached Ofcom rules. But no one's ever said anything to me. No one's ever said, don't say this, don't say that. Just be yourself. And the fact that they've given someone like me a platform, not just them, the BBC and other people, fair play. And that's what drives me is that I'm getting feedback that I can add to that conversation. And if I can move the over window as well, like some other people, fantastic. But I'm under no illusion that I'm going to make a massive difference. But that's what drives me. Well, I just want to make a difference.
Every little helps. And if everybody done just that little bit more, who knows where we can end up. If you like what you saw and what you heard and you think Lee is a jolly good chap, as I do, we will put his X link in the description. Remember to like and subscribe to the channel. The bigger the show, the bigger the guest, and we get to pick brains like Lee's. Mate,
Thanks,
I really enjoyed that. Thank you and good elf, sir.
You too.
Cheers, brother.
Thank you.